Okay, let's unpack this. Our deep dive today is into, well, a pretty remarkable set of sources. It's this meditative, almost spiritual text on gender transition, and it really rejects the typical narrative.
Absolutely. None of the usual before and after stuff.
Exactly. We're skipping that language of transformation. Instead, we're looking at transition as attunement or coherence.
Right. Like returning to a signal, something that was always there.
It's not crossing a border, it's coming home.
And what's immediately striking is the framing, isn't it? The source talks about it not as like a conscious choice or a psychological thing,
Not the decision.
more like a biological imperative, like
Yeah.
the body's just catching up to its own intrinsic frequency. We're really looking at what they call the hum beneath language.
Yeah, that hum beneath language. And because this source really challenges how we think about selfhood and even time, we've got to tackle three pretty specific concepts.
Big ones.
Yeah. We need to define this pre-verbal hum and then redefine dysphoria, seeing it as an unreceived signal.
Oh.
And maybe the trickiest one, wrestle with this idea of retrocausality.
Mm-hmm. It definitely sets a high bar for analysis. It's like we're exploring identity as something found, maybe, not built,
Discovered, not constructed.
where the goal isn't becoming someone new, but remembering the self that was kind of signaling all along.
Okay, so let's start there. At the beginning, or maybe the origin point, the pulse of becoming. This idea that before words, before culture, there was the hum. How do they describe that, this frequency?
Well, it's described as too low for language, something
Right.
carried in the body. And crucially, they note that for years, this hum, this signal, was just mistaken for static.
Just noise.
Yeah, like background noise. But the core idea is that it wasn't noise at all. It was the self's blueprint, kind of. So transition becomes attunement, a return to coherence after distortion.
I like that phrase, coherence after distortion. But okay, if the signal was always there, why the delay? What was causing the distortion, the static? If the body was already, broadcasting its truth.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The source seems to imply that distortion is mostly external. Cultural noise, maybe a lack of the right words.
The language wasn't there yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The surrounding world just fails to recognize the hum. The internal signal is constant, but the ability to actually receive it or act on it gets blocked by all that cultural static. And this leads right into how they reframe dysphoria.
Right. So how does this text redefine dysphoria? Because clinically, it's often about distress, right?
It is, but here it's defined much more poetically, maybe. The ache of a signal unreceived.
How?
Yeah. It's the pain of that fundamental mismatch, the body sort of refusing to sync up with its environment. So the goal of transition shifts. It's not some grand becoming.
Not aspirational.
No, it's quieter, an internal act, attunement. It's simply the cells, the syntax, the soul, just catching up to their own frequency.
That reframing makes it sound, I don't know, less like a huge uphill battle and more like an inevitable settling, like a system finding its balance.
Kind of.
So if the body is finally listening to its own hum, the changes wouldn't feel jarring, maybe.
Exactly. The author actually recalls that the early physical changes felt less like transformation and more like recognition.
Recognition.
Yeah, they use this really stunning visual, like color returning to the landscape after years of grayscale. The pulse isn't about creating new colors. It's about restoring the original ones, the vivid hue that was always meant to be there.
Okay, now let's get into one of the most, intellectually stimulating parts of this time. The text uses this concept of retrocausality that feels like a massive leap.
It is pretty mind-bending.
We're so used to cause moving forward, effect following.
Yeah,
This flips it all.
it does. And the source is quite explicit. They say this isn't just philosophy. They frame it as biology.
Wow.
Yeah. The body's own way of remembering itself across time. They define retrocausality as a kind of pulse, echoing backward through the years, restoring color to the outlines. So actions taken now don't just shape the future.
They change the past.
They validate it. They make sense of it simultaneously.
Wait, okay, I need to ground this a bit. How can something I do now, like the choice to transition, actually affect the past? If we take this metaphor literally, does it mean the physical steps today clarify those old, maybe confusing or painful memories? Is that the idea?
That seems to be the function, yes.
Yeah.
The realization, the alignment that happens now, it acts like a key. All those past moments of confusion or mismatch or just inexplicable sadness.
They weren't random.
Exactly. They weren't random suffering. They were the body filing dissenting reports against the wrong frequency it was tuned to. Once the frequency shifts now, the body's memory system kind of goes, that's why I felt that way then.
So the future self wasn't absent, just Muted.
Muted, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And now its presence echoes backward, clarifying the whole narrative.
Wow. That completely shifts the emotional weight of the past. And this idea, tuning versus transformation, it applies directly to the physical process too, right? Like with HR2.
Beautifully applied, yes. When the author started hormone replacement therapy, HRT, it wasn't described as change at all.
What was it then?
The source says the very first dose was experienced as tuning, not transformation. The hormones didn't change who I was, they brought me back into key.
Like an instrument.
Exactly.
Like the body was this amazing instrument that was just slightly off pitch for decades, and the HRT was like the fine-tuning peg, just aligning the string back to its true note.
Precisely. And the melody that resulted, it wasn't felt as new. It felt ancient, cyclical, returning.
Returning.
Yeah. The struggle stops being about fighting against the self and becomes about letting the self finally resonate. Like the room of echoes, which was the self filled with distortion, finally starts to ring clear.
Okay, let's pull back even further. To the time before language maybe imposed its definitions. The source talks about a pre-verbal state. Knowing was whole and wordless, like Gestalt processing.
Right. This preverbal map is where the body's compass was essentially forged. You know, culture was speaking in these rigid commandments, gender as a fixed grammar, rules, edicts.
Do this, don't do that.
Exactly. But the nervous system was quietly filing these dissenting reports, like little micro-memos from inside. Not intellectual thoughts, just pure somatic response, bodily feeling.
And these internal memos, warmth, recoil, steadiness, they fundamentally shape the author's experience, especially their attraction, right? The text reframes attraction away from just simple desire or hunger.
It's a really crucial point. Attraction is described as calibration.
Calibrate.
Yeah. It wasn't about wanting to acquire something. It was like a tuning fork struck by a nearby note, vibrating because something true was close.
A moment of mutual coherence.
Exactly. The cultural script is all about gender as property, desire as acquisition, ticking boxes on a checklist. But the body had this internal compass that only cared about coherence. It valued coherence over compliance.
So instead of the brain asking, do I want that person? The body system was asking, does that person's frequency? Does it resonate with mine? Does being near them make my own hum clearer?
That's it, precisely. And that quiet, stubborn orientation was already charting the path home, no matter how loud the cultural static got.
We get such a vivid picture of this perfect coherence in that anecdote from the source about a New Year's Eve club near Petaluma back in 1988. It's the first time the author felt this low frequency, not just inside, but externally, shared.
It really is the centerpiece for their argument about coherence. The air in the club is described as warm and soft-charged, but what was really striking was the lack of performance or measuring up.
People weren't trying.
No. The women there weren't trying to fit some standard. There was no edge, no translation, just coherence. They were emanating their selfhood, not imitating some definition.
And the little details really bring it to life, like the eyeliner, not just makeup, but revelation. Outlining a charge already there.
Yeah.
And that observation about femininity moving like water uncontained and improvisational, it suggests gender in its true form is fluid, spontaneous.
It perfectly encapsulates that difference, doesn't it, between the body's deep wisdom and the cultural rulebook. In that space, those women had already sort of ditched the external grammar. They were operating purely on their internal syntax.
So if we expand this coherence idea outwards, looking at the whole life, the process, the source frames transition itself not as a straight line, but as an ecology.
Yes, that ecology metaphor is really beautiful. It involves growth and shedding, blooming and dormancy, like the same tree through many seasons. It challenges that simple before and after story by making the entire life, including all those years of delay, part of the process.
And that delay, over 30 years in this case, it's measured in such an insightful way, not about lack of courage or commitment.
No, nothing internal like that.
It's measured in available scripts. It took 30 years for the language of me, for that specific identity, to become possible or visible in the surrounding culture. The delay was translational, not internal failure.
Which brings us right to how this reclaimed sense of self then redefines connections. Particularly the idea of love as recognition within the trans community. There's this immediate shared synchrony mentioned among other trans women, that same shared low frequency.
That sounds much deeper than just friendship or, alliance. How is this love defined in the text?
It's defined as mutual regulation, a shared remembering.
Mutual regulation.
Yeah. When their gazes meet, the source describes The brief but unmistakable pulse of "we are still here." It's like a collective affirmation of existence, a shared history of knowing that hum even when the world insisted it was just static. It's not romantic love, it's this necessary synchronization of nervous systems that confirms their reality.
And this shared reality, this confirmation, it culminates in the author's final, really powerful argument about recognition, doesn't it? The source argues that seeing trans women as women isn't some radical political act.
No, not at all. It's
Yeah.
simply an act of paying attention.
Paying attention.
It demands depth. Looking past surface expectations. Womanhood, in this analysis, isn't a costume you put on. It's described as a choreography of being, gesture, rhythm, persistence, care. It requires the observer to look for the artistry, not just the anatomy.
And this artistry carries a specific weight, described as ferocity tempered by grace.
That combination is key. And it comes, the source argues, from the necessity of having had to fight. Fight for the right to softness, fight for joy, in a world that often just refuses to see them. They're embodying womanhood by surviving into themselves, expanding the definition through the sheer persistence of their authentic selfhood.
So wrapping this up, what does this whole framework, the hum, the retrocausality, the attunement, what does it really mean for you, the listener?
I think it means shifting how we perceive transition, moving away from seeing it as crossing some difficult border
Yeah.
to simply coming home to the hum.
Hmm.
The central learning here is maybe the immense power of just attending to your own internal signal, realizing that your deepest desires might actually be recognition, and that your own gender, whatever it is at its core, could be a profound process of remembering who you already are.
And this definitely raises a big question for reflection, doesn't it? If your nervous system is, right now, constantly filing these little dissenting reports against the cultural narratives you live within, how often do you mistake your own coherence for confusion, just because you lack the right language or the cultural script to validate that internal compass?
That's a powerful thought.
It is. It encourages you to think about where, maybe in your own life, you might be operating off a kind of cultural checklist instead of truly listening to that quiet, stubborn insistence, that frequency of your body's actual truth.